Tudo sobre o milagre do deputado.
Mas seu tumor não está mais aí. E esse povo todo aí fora? Quero que você mande eles embora.
Eu sei que tem muita gente aqui precisando de ajuda.
Todo mundo falando disso, a cidade não fala de outra coisa.
Por que o senhor curou meu irmão e não me cura?
Não sou eu que curo, filho. É o careca.
Pede pra ele me curar, pai.
O senhor já sente a presença do Dr. Fritz?
Se você não pode dar ouvido a essas vozes, só vai piorar.
Não quero deixar a Lete e os meninos.
Por que a gente não pode ter uma vida normal? Zezé é um homem bom. O coração dele é bom.
Eu já disse, eu não sou médico, não. O médico é o Dr. Fritz. Longe de mim querer ganhar dinheiro em cima de quem tá doente.
Nem lembro a última vez que eu vi televisão assim com o senhor.
Não vi meus filhos crescerem porque eu tava trabalhando pra você.
Aceita. Essa é sua missão.
Foi você. Mas não parecia você, entende?
Eu não aceitei missão nenhuma!
Você tem que confiar em Deus.
Você casou com um homem e acabou com o outro. Mais da metade do tempo não sou eu que tô aqui, é o careca. Tá cheio hoje, viu? Vamos começar o nosso trabalho.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, I'm so very happy to be here and host this talk by LUIZ LIMA. LUIZ is a good friend, and he returns to our talk today to discuss the power of thoughts. Before I turn over to LUIZ, I would like to take a moment to do an opening prayer. I invite all of us to close. And as we close our eyes, let's take this opportunity to connect, to open our hearts, to open our minds to all the spirits of light who are here with us today. Along with those spirits of light, our benefactors, who guide us during our journey on earth. We ask that we all may be blessed. May our dear friend, LUIZ, receive the inspiration during this talk. And may all of us who are here present be touched by his words of wisdom. So be it. LUIZ, welcome. Hope you're doing well.
Doing well. Thank you very much. So very happy to be here, part of this program to present this topic. So thank you very much for having us.
Yes, very good to see you again. And your talk about the power of thoughts is great. I really look forward to hearing from you and learning from you. Thank you. Thank you so much, LUIZ. But before LUIZ begins his important message, please allow me to introduce him. LUIZ is a researcher on the scientific aspect of Spiritism. LUIZ facilitates studies on how to bridge science and Spiritism in Portuguese and English. He is a lecturer in the Spiritist movement. He has done lectures locally and also in national seminars and events. LUIZ also holds a degree in electronic engineering, and he works in the computer network industry. I would like to remind everyone in the audience to please send your questions, send your observations, your comments via chat throughout the talk. We will allow time for LUIZ to address those as after he concludes his presentation. So LUIZ, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Marcia. And it's once again, it's so such a pleasure to be here talking about the power of thoughts, and they are powerful, believe me. So I wanted to bring you some of the images here that might facilitate a little bit. The subject, it's very lengthy because it has several different variables and parameters that we can use to talk about it. So we decided to take the simplest one, which is let's try to establish this. There's a mix. I would say there's a mix between words such as brain, mind, thoughts. They all got mixed together. So let's try to clarify this a little bit. And we start from the get-go. What is thought? What's the concept of thought? In general, there are two general lines about thought. One line, one way of seeing it, in general, believes that the origin of the thoughts are in the brain. For those who think this is the case, you know, they understand one way, but there's another way to understand it. And those are not the only two, but there's a second way. These are the two most popular, which is, well, the origin of the thought is not in the brain, it's in the mind. Okay, let's try to understand what's being said here before we go any further. For those who believe that the origin of the thought or thoughts is in the brain, the first question that comes up is, okay, tell me where in the brain they originate. You know, the brain, as we know, by the way, with the advent of neurosciences, we are very knowledgeable. I would say we don't know everything, of course, but we are very knowledgeable. When I say we, is those who study and research, but we are very knowledgeable about how the brain works by now, and we still cannot answer that question. Where in the brain does thought originate? Another question that comes along is, what is it made of? And the third question is, what is the speed of propagation? These are questions that have been, you know, around us for a very long time. And we still don't have the answers, black and white answers for those things. Those are questions for the people who believe that the brain, thought originates in the brain. For those who think that thought originates in the minds, it's almost the same thing, except that mind is something like it's like a blurry concept. It's not really a straight black and white concept. When you say minds, different people understand different ways. So there are different interpretations about the word mind, and anything that attaches to the word has different interpretations depending on the person. So for those who believe that thought comes from the mind, whatever they think the mind is, the first question is, okay, how is it formed? Because the mind, now the mind, meaning it's not the physical brain, it's not cells in the brain. So then how would it be formed? How would these thoughts be formed? And the same other questions. What is it made of? And another question, which is the same, what's the speed of propagation? So for us to try to make a choice, if you will, do we think it's the origin is on the brain? Do we think it's on the mind, or none of them? Okay. We are going to ask you this. Think about it. Do discarnate spirits think? Well, according to Spiritism, yes. And big time, by the way. If discarnate spirits think, we have just eliminated the possibility number one, in which we believe the origin of the brain, of the thoughts is in the brain. That gets eliminated, because if discarnate spirits think, there is no brain. There are no cells. There is no physical instrument for that. So just by trying to address this question, we lean to number two. The origin is on the mind. Again, the mind is something, let's explain a little bit better, because it's not very clear. What does Spiritism tells us about thoughts? Spirit Emmanuel goes at length in several of his works. So I took some of the definitions, some of the phrases that will matter to us in our study here today. So he will say that thoughts are forces, images, things, and creations, visible and tangible in the spiritual realm. So although for us it's this, you know, imagination, if you will, we can't really touch and see, our five senses are no good for identifying thought in general. For the spirit realm, for the spiritual world, it is something visible and tangible. And he continues, he will say that thoughts are a sort of living energy that displaces subtle forces around us. What is subtle forces? Are forces that we can't detect because we don't have a way to detect. Building landscapes and shapes. So he builds landscapes and shapes. You can think of landscapes and shapes as something physical, geometrical, right? And creating magnetic centers or waves through which we emit and receive each other's performance. That's interesting because look at look at this phrase here: creating magnetic centers or waves. So thoughts create waves. Thoughts are not waves. That's the first thing we need to understand, because a lot of us will say, well, thought is a wave and so it's not a wave. It creates waves. It's a cause for the waves be created to propagate, but thoughts themselves are not the waves. Also Spirit Emmanuel, in his other book, Thought and Life, which is a book entirely about thought, he will say two interesting things. Thoughts are creative electromagnetic forces. Again, they're forces, they're not waves. And they are electromagnetic forces that propagate by means of subtle waves. Same thing again. Thoughts are not waves. They propagate using the concept of waves. So one thing that we know so far, that, you know, from all these phrases here, all these words that we have been told by Spirit Emmanuel, thoughts are forces, and it's a force that we cannot really detect in a material realm. We don't have a way to do this, because to detect things, we interact with the material realm, material world, with our five senses, and none of them can detect thought. Okay, all right, let's keep going. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. Here's André Luiz, another spirit, telling us about thoughts. They are living and active forces whose speed is even faster than the light. Okay, so the answers are coming up. We had a question in the very beginning. What is the speed of thought? We expected maybe a number, so many, whatever, miles per second or something like that. No, all we need to know is it's faster than light. And that alone puts us in a totally different scope of study, because it gets out of the material plane where we kind of have control, and here we don't. And here again, Spirit André Luiz, in his book, The Mechanics of Mediumship, thoughts are essential agents. This is very interesting, people. Essential agents for all accomplishments on the physical and extra-physical planes. All accomplishments, all excludes none. Okay, so thoughts are the base for everything. They are the essential agents for our action in the physical plane or in the extra-physical plane. Those are the forces. Again, thought is the force. So coming back to this here, coming back to the first slide that we put in, thoughts originate outside the brain. So does it automatically answer the question, thought is generated in the mind? It's hard to say, because mind is almost like a personal interpretation. So for now, let's just consider that it's not in the brain. It's outside the physical plane. That's all we need for now. We don't need to get into defining mind and studying, you know, do psychological studies. That's not necessary for what we're going to address here today. Okay, so thoughts originate outside the brain. So we need to study what happens outside the brain. And Spiritism is very clear about it. Allan Kardec tells us that between the spirit and the physical body, there's something called perispirit. The drawing that you see here, okay, on this drawing, we decided to sketch the spirit as in the shape of a body. The spirit is not a body, but it's just for visually to make more sense to you. Okay, so please understand, the spirit is not a body with a shape. It's just to make a better visual appealing for understanding what I'm going to say. So perispirit is this middleman, if you will, between the spirit and the physical body. And based on that, Allan Kardec, throughout his work, explains a lot of things. But not all of it can be explained if we don't detail a little more. So Spirit André Luiz tells us, in order to explain a little bit more, go deeper in details, I need to kind of dissecate the perispirit. So we are going to divide the perispirit in 3 bodies that he claims to be: the mental body, spiritual body, also he uses causal body at times, and etheric double. So these 3 bodies is what Allan Kardec originally considered or called the perispirit. Each one of these bodies, again, the spirit is not a body, okay, it's just visual representation, but each one of these levels has a purpose. So at the spirit level, that's where we have all our vices and virtues. When we respond to something, somebody comes to talk to us, we don't like the way the person talks, and we're going to react badly. So instead of choosing from vices, from virtues, I chose from vices. I could have done the other way around. Instead of choosing from vices and be aggressive, I could choose from virtues and be more polite and so. The vices and virtues are all the way up on that level. Anything that the spirit is going to do, it has to send a command to the next one in line. Imagine a production line. These 5 things that you see here, it's like a production line. So the spirit sends the message to the next one down the line, which is the mental body. The mental body generates thought, and that's the only thing that the mental body does, generates thought, which is the purpose of our talk today. Once the thought is formed and generated, it goes down to the next one in line, which is the spiritual body that has, that's where all the debts and credits take place. Everything is recorded in there. The Hindu called this karmic body because of exactly that. That's all the goods and evils are recorded in there. From there, it goes down the line where we have the etheric bottle, where the vital fluid is, also called ectoplasm. That's a study for another day. It's very complex, but that's where the vitality is. And from there, it gets to the organs and tissues. So things have to travel all the way down from the spirit to the physical body. Okay, once we have this in perspective, I'm going to ask you to think about a place that you like. I'm putting Paris here. It doesn't have to be Paris. It can be anything you like, a place that you have been to, but it's relatively far. So, for example, if you are on the East Coast of the United States, if you want to go to Paris, you have to take a plane and so and so and so and so, and it's going to take you about maybe 10 hours, maybe 12 hours, depends a little bit on where you are. But let's just say it takes 10 hours to get me to Paris. Now, how long does it take me to think about Paris? It's instantaneous. There is no going to the airport, no plane, nothing impeding me from just raising up my thought, and that's it. I'm in Paris. So there's a tremendous difference between the level of the physical body and the level of the mental body. If I am able to think about Paris in even picoseconds, maybe even less, thought travels at the speed more than the speed of light. If I'm able to do this, then the brain does not participate in the process, because the brain is at the bottom level, at the physical body. If I'm able to think about Paris like this, or whatever, and anything, not only a place, anything, anybody, anything at all. If you want to think about going to the moon, same thing. You're there in less than picoseconds. So thought does not depend on the brain. That kind of reinforces the idea that thought originates outside the brain. And I think with the spiritist studies, especially André Luiz, that brings us all of this here, I think it's very clear that thought generates outside the brain and is going to make its way into the brain. And it will. We're going to discuss this a little bit. but thought originates in the mental body, several layers above the physical body that we have when incarnate. And by the way, discarnates think. Discarnates don't have physical body, they don't have etheric double, and they're still thinking because thought originates way above that. So how do we, what happens when we think? So let's say on the left side, let's say it's you, okay, the representation of our subtle bodies and all. On the right side, it's the same thing for another person, another incarnate person. When we think, we generate this thought that propagates in waves. Thoughts are not the waves, but it propagates in waves, and it goes all the way to reach the other person. How does this other person pick up the idea? Does it go to their brain? Where does it go? How do they receive this thing? Well, here's on the right side of your screens a representation of somebody who is incarnated. But somebody who is discarnated can also receive your thoughts, and they don't have brains. If they're discarnated, they don't have a brain, because the thought is received at the same level that it is emitted. We just saw this on one of the Emmanuel phrases. So if thought generates from the mental body, it is received at the mental body level, because that's the level that understands that energy. So you think of something, your mental body puts it out. Somebody's thinking something, you receive thoughts. We perceive thoughts through our mental bodies as well. So the brain is almost like a secondary thing, because first of all, again, discarnates don't have a brain. And this thought that was generated by us, let's say we are on the left side here, it's going to make all the way down to the physical body, which is where the brain is. But it has to pass through first the spiritual body, then the etheric double, and then it's going to make its way into the physical body. We're going to see what happens here, because that's important. That's very important information. And I think that's the key to what I wanted to bring to you today, what I want to have us think about it. So let's understand what takes place at this mental body. So the spirit sends the energy, sends a message, if you will, to the mental body. The mental body is going to generate the thought. So let's say I'm thinking about a garden, and you see a few flowers in there. So my thought is a flower. As we saw in the beginning, when we think, we form these shapes and landscapes. This is called thought form. So the spirit sends a message to the mental body elaborates the thought and generates a thought form. This thought form is what's visible and tangible in the spiritual realm, as we saw in the beginning. Anyway, so here we go. So there's an energy that flows from the spirit to the mental body, and there's an energy that flows from the mental body to form the thought form, but the energies are not the same. It's not the same type of energy. The spirit talking in quotes to the mental body carries one kind of energy. The mental body generating the thought form is another form of energy. So in between, there's a conversion of energy. That's what the mental body does. It converts one type of incoming energy to another type of outgoing energy. Well, so if there's a conversion of energy here, right, and we know this from physics, every time you convert one type of energy to another type of energy, there's a residual energy, there's a residue, there's a byproduct. Same thing here. So every time the mental body forms the thought, a byproduct is generated. It's becoming interesting, right? Yeah, I thought so too when I was studying this. Well, what happens to this byproduct? Where does it go? What is it made of? This residual energy. Well, let's see. Let's study this. It's very interesting. So we saw that the mental body generates the form, the thought form. In generating the thought form, two things will happen: the creation itself and the propagation. Okay, so the creation of thought forms. By the way, I put here on your screen, you can see mental larvae. That's another term used by Spirit André Luiz to mean thought form. He uses both. Okay, so here it is. My mental body generated this energy and created the thought form. Now, this thought form can be something very expressive or can be something dim, not really very bold. And what makes it be bolder or not? What makes it be really strong or not necessarily really strong? Two things. Our will. Am I really willing this thing to happen? This thought, does it really represent something important to me that I want to put my emphasis, my focus, and my energy on? Yes or no? And how long can I sustain this thought form, which is what I called here the upholding? How long can I sustain that for? Here's an example. Let's say you're driving home, okay, and it just comes through your mind, using a popular expression, it comes through your mind. Well, when I get home, I need to make dinner, for example. And that was it. It came in, I gotta make dinner, and you keep driving, paying attention to traffic, or the thoughts come in and out. So the fact that I thought about making dinner wasn't really significant in terms of effort and energy. I didn't have to like concentrate on that. It was just a thought that came in and out. So the sustaining that was really, really minimum time-wise. The upholding was minimum. The will also was not necessarily great. So it's a very dim thought. Some other thoughts are different. We sustain them for a long time. We want this thing to happen. Unfortunately, because of our level of evolution, a lot of these thoughts are negative thoughts. They're vice-based thoughts. So we really want to, I really don't like that person. He keeps going and going for hours and days and months and years. Because if we keep sustaining that, the thought's going to be one of these bold thoughts. And same for the will. So will and upholding is what's going to make this thought be more bold, I would say, or not. That's at the creation time. Now, there's also the propagation. Propagation is in waves. So the thought originates in the mental body and is going to be put out there. Waves propagate in several different ways. For what we need today, I'm just going to say very briefly, waves can be short or long. And there's a difference between them. The difference that we as spiritists need to know today, we're not doing deep physics or anything like that, studies today. Short waves are very intense and they have a long range. They go really far. For example, in the 70s and 80s, it was very common to have a short waves radio, depending on your age, right? You were able to see, to know those shortwave radios. For example, somebody would say something in Europe, transmitted in shortwave radio, you would catch it down in South America easily. And it was a straight shot. No satellite, nothing like this. No, we don't have anything like that in the 70s and early 80s. So the short wave goes a long way. The long waves don't go too far. They, for example, long waves like FM radio, you need, if you're in a city, start driving away. There's a point after maybe 20, 30, 40 miles, you don't hear the station anymore. It starts to fade out and then you don't hear that anymore. Because these waves are not nearly as, the range is not nearly as good as the one for short waves, okay? So that you understand. Now, short waves, the powerful ones, are usually linked to true love, unconditional love, charity, anything love and all its variations, anything that comes out of it. Long waves are usually linked to material aspects, vices, and things that are not the anti-love, I would say. So short waves, okay, brings us, when you think about it, it brings us words like these that you see here: compassion, charity, solidarity, humility, and so right? Long waves brings us the other way around. Hatred, greed, selfishness, and a whole list of things. And short waves, which are the ones linked to love, will have an impact on the physical body. We're going to get there in a minute. But it will clean up, protect, and boost the immune system. The other waves, right, the ones based on vices and purely material interests, these will pollute and undermine the immune system. That's pretty significant. So just what I'm thinking, or the energy that I put in, and what I'm thinking, what I'm bringing from my mental body can kill my body, literally, depending on what I'm thinking. So the energy of these thoughts is something very interesting. Again, from the mental body, it has to go to the spiritual body. And there's a conversion of energy, because the energy level of the spiritual body is not the same as the mental body. So there's a conversion of energy at the spiritual body, same in the etheric double, and then it finally reaches the body. When thought goes through all of this and it reaches the body, it reaches one particular organ, which is the brain, as we know. And the brain then is nothing else than the instrument to receive the thoughts. Is the instrument that registers these thoughts, which is totally different than the one which generates the thoughts. Nothing originates here. It comes from outside. I usually use this expression, the brain buys what the mind sells. So it comes from outside, and the brain registers these thoughts. Once they are registered in the brain once it controls the entire biology of the system, things are going to happen at the biological level. But the thought is not generated at the brain. Here's André Luiz speaking about this. The spirit finds in the brain the seat of command for the energies that serve it as the tool for expressing its sentiments and thoughts. Again, it's a tool for expressing what the spirit is carrying within. It's not the tool that generates anything. The brain does not generate anything. So now our thought made its way down to the brain. What happens in the brain? Well, several different things. We're going to see some of them. It depends on how I look at it. There's several different angles. There's several different possibilities to analyze this. We're going to take a peek on some of them. So from the evolution point of view, when you look at the brain throughout time, throughout all the kingdoms, it had to go through an evolutionary process. We start on the inferior animals when the primary type of brain was called the reptilian. So reptilian brain is in all the animals. Now with time, things were developing, we evolved, or creation evolved, and then the brain got a second layer, if you will, that we called paleo-mammalian. And then later on, when humans came on board, another layer was added, neo-mammalian. So the brain has 3 levels, and that's very well explained by André Luiz in his book, In the Greater World. So the brain has 3 levels if you think about evolution. So the brain was not ever the way it is now. No, it came from a lower layer. You had a second layer added on later, and then a third layer. That's the brain that we know today for humans. That's from the evolution point of view. From the anatomy point of view, okay, considering again the works of André Luiz, the reptilian brain, the lower level brain, is called primitive brain. That's the expression he uses. We will see different other names across literature as cortex, basal ganglia, different names, but it's the primitive. Okay, it's the lowest level. In the middle, the paleo-mammalian, in anatomy, it's called the intermediate zone, or also known as neocortex. And at the highest level, it's called, we have the frontal lobes. We don't want to go too deep into this because we're not studying the brain at length. We are just looking at what the brain does with the thought that came in. Okay, so at the highest level, we have the frontal lobes. Each one of these takes a different type of energy. The energy level at the reptilian is the instinct. Things happen because they are automated in the perispirit, if you will. For example, digestion. I don't have to think about, oh, I ate, so I got to stop. I can't do anything until my system digests the food. No, it's automated. Heart beating, automated. A lot of things in our system are automated. Those that we have automated, the animals have too. Okay. The second layer number 2, the energy type is what's happening today. It's us now. It's the now. It's us moving and talking. I'm talking to you. You're listening to me. That's the moment that we are living now. And at the highest level, we have sublime components. Okay, things that we can do different from instinct. Let me try to give you an example. Can you scream? I can. I think you can too. Can monkeys and lions scream and roar? Yes, they can. So screaming and things like this, it's at the very lowest level. It doesn't require any ability. Any of us can do, us animals and us humans. Now, playing the piano, can the lion do that? Can the giraffe do that? No, they can't, because it requires sublime components. So that's the difference, more or less, in terms of the energy type that each of these layers of the brain carry. In terms of each physical person, it's each individuality. In the lowest level, what we have are impulses, which actually trigger instinct, but we have impulses. You know, animals act by impulses. They don't really think in the first moment. In the secondary piece of the brain, the second layer, it's our current conquers. It's what we have today, what we have accomplished, what we have done. We are able to analyze and see, oh, I did this, I did that, okay? And the third level is what I want to do. It's my objectives, my goals, something that I have to plan on, I have to put a strategy on. Animals can't do that. We can. What is our focus? Okay. At the lowest level, our focus is the habits. Everything is automated, things work, and I don't have to worry about it. That's the lowest level. At the second level, it's my effort to make things happen. I'm living here, then I have to eat. I have to take care of my body. I have to do things. I have to do my work. That's the effort that we carry in the current moment. Of course, we have to have the will to do that. And at the highest level are my creativity. Well, I really could do this instead of, you know, staying where I am right now. I want to go to the next level. I want to do this and I want to do that. I need to do different things in 10 years, in 5 years. Okay, so that's the focus. At the conscious level, a consciousness level, at the lowest level, it's the subconscious. On the current level, conscious is what I have right now. And at the highest level is the superconscious. And finally, in terms of timeline, if you think about timeline, at the lowest level, we're living in the past because that's our animal part. Now, we are living in the present at the second layer. On the third layer, we are planning for the future. So you see the 3 layers of the brain, they do different things. Of course, one depends on the other, but they do different things. And that kind of explains why we can do things that the animals can't do. Okay, there are requirements that need to be met for certain things to happen at the highest level. Okay, then I'm going to show you this phrase here, which is very interesting. This author, Eckhart Tolle, is very well known in the US. He's a very well-known spiritualist here in the US. He's sold several books. He's actually from German, but he has conquered his space in the literature because of, you know, the way he brings things up and he makes us think. And here's one phrase, one interesting phrase that he says. It's worth going slowly, okay? We spend most of our lives thinking about the past and wondering how our future can be different from it. Okay, let's stop for a minute. If we spend most of our lives thinking about the past, we are at the red level. Remember, reptilian, instinct, habits. So we are very much in favor of keeping the habits. In the meantime, we forget the present moment, layer 2. Postpone our achievements, future, to a distant day, and create dreams that will make us happy if they are fulfilled. So you see, we keep postponing reaching the third layer. We keep the habits of the first layer and keep doing the same thing. That's what he's telling us here. We hardly ever risk going up to the third level and do something. That's, of course, a general statement. It is not valid for each one of us, but for the majority of the people, yes, it is. And here, how he concludes, to change our lives, we need to start now. See, now is the second layer. If we are on the first layer, habits, in order to get to the third, we need to start now. And then we can get to the third layer. This is a very powerful phrase on a very powerful book in terms of penetration in all humanity. It's a very famous book, and it's completely in line with what we have been told by Spiritism in general, especially when we look at what André Luiz just told us, and I put those graphics for you. And I want to bring something else too. I want to bring you Ellen Langer. You see here, she wrote a book in the early 80s, Mindfulness. It's a very interesting book. She narrates an experience, an experiment that she herself produced in the early 80s. This is what the experiment was. She took 2 groups of, if I'm not mistaken, 25 people. I might be mistaken on the number, but I think it was 25. So she took 2 groups of 25 people outside Boston to a monastery that was not being used. It was not being used as a monastery. It was just abandoned. So she prepared the whole thing. Of course, a group of people. She was leading the group. So she prepared the whole thing in terms of outside painting, internal decoration, so and so. The goal was to have 2 groups. One group was being told, you're gonna, and these people were all over 65 at the time, okay? Most of them over 75. So she took these people and said to one group, she said, well, you're gonna be in a place that's gonna resemble the 50s. And to the other group, she said, you're gonna be in the 50s, not resemble, you're gonna live back in the 50s, completely 100% of your time, energy, and focus. Inside the monastery, everything was 50s. Not a single piece of decoration, art, nothing at all would resemble anything past the 50s. The people who would literally live 100% of their time in there, 1 week, in the 50s, for those people, even the news were the news in the 50s. From the original, the black and white TVs, exactly as they were in the 50s, she was able to get some of those. The news were the same news that were being presented to these people in their 1950 and so. The purpose of the experiment was to see the influence of thought and age on the biometric markers of each person. So before the experiment took place, she took all the 50 people, 2 groups of 25, and collected all that information, blood tests and hormone tests and anything from, you do a full-blown exam from top to bottom. So she acquired that information. 1 week later, when the experiment ended, she took the exactly same biometric markers. For the group that was told, you're going to be in a place that resembles the 50, there was no significant alteration. It was about the same before and after the week that they spent out in there. For the second group that were told, you're going to be living, literally living in the 50s, there was a tremendous difference in their biometric markers. If you would, that's what they did. They took the two sets of data from the same person, and they took to several doctors and that didn't know anything about it. And so they would ask these doctors, what do you think about these two? And the doctors would say, well, these are people in their 70s, maybe. These other here are people in their 20s, maybe 30s. That was very interesting. So you see, the way these people were thinking that they were in the 50s made a tremendous measurable difference. We could see in their organism, in their physical organisms. And then she concludes with two phrases that I think are very interesting for us to reflect upon. Number one, this is out of the book. Those are not my words, out of the book. Regular and irreversible cycles of aging. You see irreversible in quotes because it is in the quotes in the book. That's not me. Regular and irreversible cycles of aging that we witness in the later stages of human life may be a product of certain assumptions about how one is supposed to grow old. Isn't that interesting? That's habit. That's reptilian brain. Oh, I'm supposed to grow old this way. I'm supposed to get old. I'm supposed to have pain. I'm supposed to feel this. I'm supposed to... That's reptilian brain. And she continues. If we didn't compel to carry out these limiting mindsets, meaning if we decide to step out of the reptilian brain, we might have a greater chance of replacing years of decline with years of growth and purpose. That's beautiful. And those two phrases are based on a true experiment, the one that I just told you. And it's not something, well, let's assume this is going to happen. No, it didn't happen. We measure, we have scientific proof of it. Very interesting. So you see how we are, how our not using properly our three layers of the brain, how we can undermine ourselves. We can completely undermine ourselves. And coming back here, again, the lowest level, the red level, is where habits are, reptilian, living in the past, all of that. Okay, from this drawing, let's go to the next set of conclusions here. So, on the reptilian brain, okay, we are at the lowest level. At the highest level, we are at the frontal lobe. We saw this before. What does it mean? Reptilian brain makes us territorial. When you say some things like this, no, you can't touch it. This is mine. This is mine. Get out of my place. Get out of my, this belongs to me. That's reptilian brain. That's what the animal does. Territorial. At the highest level, this is not mine. This is ours. This is all us. Let's grow. Let's expand our consciousness. Instead of atrophying within a certain territory, we expand our consciousness. At the red level, we have instinct. We are driven by instinct. At the highest level, we are driven by rationality and logic. Our thoughts are more, or the way we deal with things are more, should be, right? Rational and logic. If we are acting up upon instinct all the time, we just be aggressive and respond, without thinking. That's what the monkey does. That's what the lion does. That's what the animals do. At the lowest level, there's guilt because we do things and then we are kind of, well, I did this. What do I do now? I'm sorry. How do I react to that? At the highest level, there's liberation. There's no guilt. Everything is liberating. Oh, I did this in the past. Good thing I don't do that anymore. That's liberation. You see, at the red level, it's like this. Oh, I did this. Oh my God, I did this. Oh, how am I gonna do? Oh my God, I did this. I'm stuck. At the green level, it is, oh, I did this. Oh, what an awful thing. Good thing I don't do this anymore. Liberation. At the lowest level, red level, I'm just surviving. That's what the animals do. I'm just surviving. At the highest level, I'm growing. And they're opposed. Either I survive or I grow. And that happens inside each one of our cells. Each protein inside each one of our cells is either in survival mode or growth mode. Of course, the cells follow the spirit, but it goes down not only to the brain general conscious level, it goes down to the cell level. At the lowest level, there's fear. At the highest level, there's love. At the highest level, love is more important than fear. At the lowest level, fear is more important than love. Not that the animals don't love each other. Yeah, we can see those, mothers getting their cubs and so, but it's different. And finally, at the red level, everything is a problem. We create problems out of problems. At the green level, everything is a solution. Every situation is a solution to something else. At the red level, every situation is a problem that came along. It all depends how we interpret. If we are stuck in the green level, if we are stuck, in the red level, we are undermining our own growth, our ability to love, to think, to do strategy, to expand ourselves. How do we not get stuck in there? Well, Emmanuel tells us there's two things, right? The wing of knowledge and the wing of love. Knowledge will help. Knowledge is a starting point here. And once we understand all of this, once we understand what goes around, it makes things easier for us to see what's going on outside the box and understand. And I want to leave you with this image that we presented before. The byproduct of the conversion of energy from the spirit to thought form goes where? To the brain. What is it doing in the brain? It depends. If the thought is bad, what kind of residue do I have? What kind of byproduct do I generate? Bad energy that's stuck in the brain now. If I think something good and nice and beautiful, if I'm at the charity level, love level, what happens to this byproduct? It carries that energy. It carries the good energy of love, of charity, of meekness, and it's going to go to the brain. So the brain gets the residue that the mental body generates and creates. So if our thoughts are good things, good energy, love, and so, our brain is going to make good use of it. And there's a general feeling of wellness in the physical body because the brain commands the physical body. If the brain is sensing that everything is good and well, the whole body is going to follow that. When my thoughts are negative, when my thoughts are revenge and I don't like this and negative things, what happens to the byproduct? It carries that energy. The brain lives based on that energy and makes the entire body follow along. So friends, I wanted to leave this image here. Just take a good look at it and let's maybe change the way we think. Let's maybe consider changing the way we feel about ourselves and producing thoughts has an impact first on me, on my brain, and then maybe if on the others. They can block my bad thoughts and receive my good thoughts, or the other way around. I don't control this, but I control what I put in my brain, and that matters to me. So that's what I wanted to present to you today. The power of thoughts. They are really powerful. And I appreciate you participating with us, and hopefully it's gonna give you some light on the subject. It gave light to me. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luiz. Let's go ahead and listen to some of the questions and hope we can comment. We have about 15 minutes right now. So
Okay.
everyone, if you have any comments, any questions, please put in the chat window. So we have one from Luiz Vidlaka. Hi, thank you, Luiz. To Luiz. Once the thoughts are formed in the mental body, part of the spirit, does it mean that thoughts are universal fluid? Good question. So what are your thoughts,
Good question.
Luiz?
Yeah, the generation of thought is by modifying the universal fluid. So the mental body has the ability to modify the universal fluid and convert to thought forms. Now, let me just make a quick parenthesis here. Personally, I don't like to use, that's just me, okay? I don't like to use the word universal fluid because it might be a little complicated. Universal cosmic fluid is at the purest level. It's at the God's level. It gets modified as it comes down. The fluid that we are talking about here is the planetary fluid, which is already modified from the universal cosmic fluid many times over. So we are living within this planetary fluid. The thoughts that we have here are modifications of that planetary fluid. It comes from that.
Thank you. Thank you, Luiz. I hope it answered to you, the other Luiz. And we have another one. We said, Luiz, you discussed that the thought is originated and is received in the mental body. Hence, the brain is secondary in this process. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of this information in reference to Alzheimer patients? And I think the question is really for those who have family and friends with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, the mental process, as we saw, the thought process does not require a brain because discarnate spirits can think and they hear, in quotes, thoughts. So the brain is something secondary. Alzheimer's doesn't necessarily has to do with the thought. The thought is transferred or transmitted to the physical body at the brain through all the process that we explained. But if the physical body has some sort of damage or difficulty on that organ, the information might not be transferred properly. And that's what happens in cases of autism, Alzheimer's, because those are diseases where the organs have been degenerated. It's a thought is prior to that. The thought makes its way to the brain, but it's processed, I would say, imperfectly in the brain because of what goes on in there. And same for accidents. People with accidents that hit their heads hard and damage part of the brain, they will have the same physical limitations. They still think. And we know that because, how many times do we hear that people are in the hospital in coma and they have a brain damage or something? They come out and they will tell you everything that happened. So,
Thank you, Luiz. That's very comforting to know, right?
Yeah.
So Daniel, thank you, Daniel, said, if thoughts are creative forces, why is it that the majority of the time our will and or desire are not materialized as we wish?
There's a very interesting study. It's in the book, The Mind and the Brain by Jeffrey Schwartz. He's a scientist, a scientific book. But he, at one point, he's going to talk about free will in the brain, not free will, the spiritist concept, free will at the physical level in the brain. And they come to the conclusion that between the time that the brain receives a command from the upper realm, and it's going to act upon. So let's say, for example, I'm going to close my hand like this. So there's a command from the spirit that says, "Oh, close your hand right now," and I do this. Between the time that the brain receives the command and it actually moves, sends trigger signals to the muscles to do this, there's a 200 millisecond interval. That is the time for free will to kick in and say, "No, I'm not doing that." So you see, although we generate thoughts, not necessarily they become actions. You can think of something, for example, well, once I finish over here, I'm going to go to the supermarket, and I don't go. The thinking not necessarily becomes physical action. But once the thought is produced, you can never unproduce, if you will, right? You can never take it back because it's out there. Once the waves are propagated, you cannot unpropagate the waves, but not necessarily it's going to be processed at the brain level and making an action out of it.
Thank you. Good explanation. Yasko, hi Yasko. She says, loved Ellen Langer statement, to grow old is a state of mind and attitude, not an irreversible determinism. So how the environment one is inserted in and plays a role. Do spiritualism or materialism goals help better to get out of this reptilian mode?
Okay, let's first of all, we are spirits and material parts at the same time because we're incarnated. So we have a part of us is on the spirit, part of us is matter. Because of the level of evolution that we are in, we are a lot more subject to material influence than spiritual influence. Most of us, not all of us. For example, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Brazilian medium Chico Xavier, people like that, they are very evolved spirits. So the influence of the material world on them is minimum. They, if you look at their stories, are horrible in terms of what they had to go through in the early life, and abuses and all kinds of things. And they didn't become a psychopath. They didn't become a criminal. They didn't discount any of that, or it didn't trigger any violent process within them because they are very evolved spirits. So we are influenced by the material plan a lot more than the spiritual. So yes, the environment for us matters. And that's why it mattered to the point that they were able to reproduce the environment from 35, 40 years ago to those people, and it worked. That's proof of it. That's proof that the material realm puts a lot of influence on us. We act and react to that environment a lot. So
that's very interesting. So RK asks, could we have a block between the spirit and the mental body? And if so, what would that produce?
The block is called free will. Free will makes you, I was just saying about the 200 milliseconds, that's the free will in the brain, but there's free will in other places. For example, free will in the spiritual body, which is the body in the middle, just below the mental. That's where the law of karma is. That's where my debts and credits are. So my thought can be, oh, I'm going to do this. And then in the middle, I say, no. When I look at my history, it's not going to work because every time that I did this, I got in trouble. So no, stop, abort the process, if you will. So yes, there's the block is, it's not something external. The block comes from within, from my free will in being able to analyze the situations and stop them because I'm do something that I did before and I know it's not going to be nice. For example, if you, analogy, right? If you put your hands on fire and you get burned, you don't need to do this again to make sure it's going to burn. You only do it once. And if you do it twice, there's going to be a point where you're going to say, no, not this time. I'm tired. I've done 15 times. I need my hand in place, So yes, it's free will that controls everything.
Thank you. Glaucio, hi Glaucio. He asks, why is it so easier for us to be controlled by fear, i.e. by our reptilian brain?
Because that's what the focus is on. If our focus is on the reptilian brain level, not the brain itself, but the level and everything that comes along with it, yes, we are in fear. You see people like, I was just saying, people like Chico Xavier and Gandhi and Luther King and other people, if you tell these people, well, you can't do this, they will say, why not? It doesn't make any sense to them. Can you tell Gandhi that say you cannot face the British, monarchy or the British, high level of government? He will say, of course I can, and he did. For most of us, we would say, oh no, you feel fear. He was able to understand that love would have him overpass all of these things. Whatever the size of the Himalaya is, he's gonna go over it because he's love driven, not physical driven.
Thank you, Luis. Kirsten, hi, Kirsten, is asking, do you think that the obsessors don't want the general public to understand this? Because the more and more people can free themselves from the mental chains that bind them.
Yes, obsessors operate at the reptilian brain of those who they obsess.
Mm-hmm.
You see, if there's, let's go back to this. Reptilian brain is the red level. Mm-hmm. Remember that. The red level ties into vices at the long energies, the long waves. They are tied into vices at the human level. So if you are reptilian, you're not in love mode. If you're not in love and growth mode, you're in survival and fear mode. So you're allowing things to come in. When you grow, nothing is going to come in. Nothing bad is going to come in because you're expanding your consciousness. You are conquering things instead of being conquered by fear and by, that's what the obsessors use. So they conquer those who they obsess by inviting themselves in and operating at the lowest level of the brain. So, for example, the person who is being under control of an obsessor, they will act upon instinct and fear, and they will grunt and roar. They are not thinking. They are not, oh, okay, hold on. I shouldn't be doing this because that's not, no, they can't perceive that way because their third level is shut down. The second level ties into the first, and then they, when the obsessive process is really, really, really intense and bold, the level of domination is so much that the obsessor will say, well, you go up the building, go to the 30th floor and jump. There's no green level in there. There's no blue level in there. It's all red.
Louise said to us, if we consider that the perispirit is tied to the physical body of the incarnated on a cell-to-cell basis, couldn't we also say that our perispirit has an ethereal brain? Is there any supporting evidence to that? Or supporting reference to that?
Okay, the ethereal brain, ethereal is at the etheric body level. Etheric body level is vitality. That requires a physical brain attached to it. Okay, so that's for incarnates. For discarnates, that doesn't apply because they don't have a physical body. But yes, it's cell to cell. It is cell to cell. But, when thoughts make their way down from the mental level, the mental body coming down to a spiritual body, and it goes down to the physical body. If there's a physical body, it will be processed by the cells, but if there isn't, they will not. They will stop at the level of, you call the perispirit, I'm being a little bit more specific. They stop at the spiritual body level, which is debts and credits. So, you can't really consider that way.
I have another one from Yasko. Thank you, Yasko. She says, millions of years of reptilian brain development versus more recent development of the neocortex and frontal lobe brain. I'm sorry. Of the neocortex and frontal lobe, right?
Yeah, the frontal lobe is the current level that we are in humanity. Okay, so the basic brain is reptilian brain. You see, for us humans, we have all three. We have all three, and sometimes we use one or another, but we have all three. So we do have reptilian, then yes, then what we call the neocortex, and then the frontal lobe. Yes. The frontal lobe is where creativity is where strategy, imagination is. You can make a strategy for something to happen, let's say tomorrow. Something simple. You can just say, well, tomorrow I want to go to the beach. For example, it's something simple. Animals can do that because that requires creativity. That requires the ability to imagine and put a strategy that will come along with that.
Very interesting. And RK sent another question again. So thank you, RK. Do you mean short and long waves as time? How long do we think about something?
The waves are propagation. I'm not going into the time thing because that would be a physics study. That's not what I meant exactly. Short waves means they are without going into physics, okay? Because it wouldn't help us much here on the particular subject. Short waves carry the information with a tremendous impact. Long waves carry the information with less significant impact, okay? Sustaining the wave is different because you can sustain. Short waves are good things in general. The penetration of short waves are usually associated with love and good things. But sustaining works for both. You can sustain something that's good for a long time, or you can sustain something that's bad for a long time. Sustaining it's the intensity of what you want to do, what you're thinking, not what you want to do, what you're thinking. The intensity of what you're thinking will depend on this upholding order, how long you want to hold this thought for. But people can think good things for a long time, for a short time. You can think of a bad thing for a long time or a short time. In the obsessive processes, especially the worst ones, the obsessor has a tremendous capacity or ability to sustain waves with will for a very, 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 very long time. But the energy they carry is bad. It's something usually intrusive.
We have another one from the U.S. Spiritist Federation page. And the question is, what's the difference between ideas and thoughts? Can you speak to that?
Well, let's see if I can. Well, thoughts are a product of the mental body. Okay, it's something that's going to become feasible to the spiritual realm. An idea, for me, or my personal way of thinking, is more vague. A thought is more specific. A thought produces a thought form. Ideas not necessarily. I think it's more generic. For example, I want to do something good. It's an idea. A thought form is, I'm going to go to the charity, station down the street and help do something. That's how I understand. Okay.
Thank you. Let me see if we have another question.
Okay.
And RK, thank you. What do you mean by short and long?
Short and long waves. Yeah, we're coming back to physics. Okay, waves are, let me see how can I explain without making it very complicated.
And you gave an example earlier today, right, of the FM versus the short waves. Yeah.
In the radio in the 70s and 80s, yeah, you would have a station saying Paris. You would go to like Buenos Aires and you would just hear, if you had the receptor for short waves. That's how powerful they are. So short waves go a lot. The range of a short wave is tremendous as compared to long waves. Long waves really don't go too far. The FM doesn't go more than 30 miles or something. That's what we mean by short and long. That's a physics. studied. I just mentioned because it tells us the range, how far they go. So short waves will go far, long waves will not. So the impact of short waves, good thoughts, is a lot more than long waves.
So just taking a stab at understanding this, Louise, what you mentioned is every time I have good thoughts, thoughts of love, those thoughts will generally produce a short wave versus
Yes.
a more negative thoughts. It's a longer wave. Therefore, the impact of good thoughts is
Higher,
far-reaching and stronger.
more significant.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well,
Let me see if we have any more. We're coming very close to our probably our last question. We don't have any more, so let's come to this end of our talk today. And it's just so good. It's a lot to learn, and we can see that by just the range of questions and the number of them. And Louise, I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone who has been able to be here today and watch this live talk. And for all of you who have been following our weekly talks, next Saturday, which is March 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern, please don't miss Nathan Fonseca, who will be speaking about Abigail the Christian. And before we close, I would ask Louise to please say a prayer.
sure, absolutely. So let's close our eyes. You can follow us here on your computer, on your smartphone. Let's concentrate on the image of Jesus and all the good things he was able to bring us, all the good thoughts, all the information and the message he was able to convey to us. Let's always try to do our best to live by what he said, what he taught. We wanted to ask permission as well to the Father and Jesus to extend our blessings or our good thanks to all our mentors and guides, all of us. We appreciate the time that Jesus allows us to have here together, this opportunity for, once again, another study on everything that we were taught way in the past, that we can continue to be, all of us, enlightened and guided by the good spirits, and we can never deviate from the message that we should be studying and understanding. So thank you, Jesus, very much for this opportunity, and thank you, all our guides. So be it.